name's Henry Woodall. I was a PFC. Joined the Army in Marietta, 1962. I can tell you the reason why I joined. I got mad at my first wife. That really taught her a lesson. But I joined in '62. Went to basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Went to advanced infantry training in the same place. Went to jump school at Fort Benning. Fort Benning. And Fort Benning, Georgia. Graduated from jump school and I got stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the 82nd Airborne.
My name is Joe Hagler. I spent 20 years in the military from 1980 through 2001. I was a yeoman, first class, E6, when I retired. My
name is Arlie Tucker. I served in the Navy 24 years. Started off in Chicago. My original hometown was Valparaiso, Indiana, and they sent me to Chicago for the testing to enter the boot camp and all. I graduated boot camp there in Great Lakes, Illinois, and went down to Memphis for aviation training, and right back to Chicago, VR 51, which was my first command.
Okay, my name is Edward Windsor. I was in the United States Air Force as an airman first class from July of 1981 to July of 1985. I was stationed at Bitburg, Germany, and at Eglin, Florida. I was an airframe repair specialist on F-15 Eagle fighter planes.
My name is Tammy Cole. I'm a special agent in the United States Air Force. I joined the Air Force in 1991. As a child, I remember wanting to come into the military, saying the Pledge of Allegiance at school, and the American history that I really loved. So other than that, I didn't have any affiliation with the military, no family members that I knew of at that time. But I just really wanted to come in the military. And when I was in high school, I decided not to go ahead and join because I was really close to my family, and I'd worked since I was in the 8th grade, helping provide food, for the family. And I just didn't want to leave them. I was that close to them. So 1989, after I graduated high school, I married an Air Force sergeant and moved out to New Mexico with him. For 2 years, I begged him at that time to let me join the Air Force because I loved it, being around the military, and he wouldn't let me. So one day he went on a 30-day temporary duty, and I went and talked to a recruiter. 30 days later, when he came back, I left 4 days later on the bus going off to basic training, and that's how my career started.
Actually, a lot of people think airborne, after you get out of basic, it's just like regular Army, but it's like being in basic most of the times. And never been in a plane in my life. First time I got in a plane, I had to jump out of it. And actually, to this day, it actually scares me to land in an airplane. But it was an experience. Wasn't taking nothing for it.
Yeoman is a personnelman, basically for the officers. And we carry the secret clearances and the classified stuff that goes through. Spent time being an inspector and a career counselor and all those other little jobs that goes with it.
At that point, being the young buck that I was, I didn't realize at that point I'd joined into the reserves. Once I got to VR 51 in Glenview, I was there for a month and they sent me home. Said, come back next month. So from that point, I tried to go back to active duty, and in my attempts to do that, found that once I became aircrew and flew with the airplanes I was working on, that I could regain the active duty status. And that's what I did.
One of my best memories was getting a ride in one down in Florida before I got out of the service. That was pretty interesting. It was actually exciting and fun.
I wanted it to be a career, and once I came in, it definitely has been. I've served in New Mexico, of course. Right after that, I served at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, Omaha, Nebraska, back down at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and now I'm here at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. I'm one of 4 active duty members at Dobbins Air Reserve Base now. I've completed 7 deployments during that time, to various parts of the country. And no one really likes to deploy.
I went through recon training at Fort Benning later, and I went through Pathfinder training at Fort Bragg.
I started out in boot camp in Orlando, Florida. From there, I went to the Guided Missile School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. From there, I went to Houston, Texas, and then transferred to New Orleans, where I was on the inspection team. I went from New Orleans to Jacksonville, Florida, and then to Atlanta Naval Air Station for my retirement.
My first detachment was in 1988. Detached to Atsugi, went to Sigonella, Sicily, was the first detachment. And from there we'd service the service members that were out there. We didn't just fly Navy, we flew Air Force, Army, Marines, the whole shot. And wherever they needed to go, whatever they needed to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking to leave your family and your friends and your loved one. And my last deployment when I left here was really hard to leave the family that I've made here at this post. And of course I cried, but
Went to Dominican Republic when they had a little uprising. And while we were there, I got the nickname Cowboy. And the reason I got the nickname Cowboy, I was on guard one night and I heard a noise and I couldn't see out real far. I kept hollering, halting, they didn't stop. I did what I was supposed to, they kept coming, so I started shooting. And so did everybody else. But next morning, we went out to see what happened. It was a dead cow. So the cow didn't stop, so therefore my nickname was Cowboy for a little while.
But I guess the most touching and the most memorable time that I was there was watching my mother as we got piped ashore from the military. I took her across there because she was always there with me. It was her idea for me to go in. And she was always there, maybe not physically, but mentally she was always with me. She's the one I always turned to when I was down or when I was having doubts about my life and my career. She was always there for me. And when I was popped ashore, I had her escorted up and she went with me. So she was my pride.
One trip, we kind of made this, we call it a trophy of our own. It's a globe, and it was because we had flown completely around the world in 8 days. We had a mission to transport a group of people from the other side of the world, and instead of going there and coming back the same way, we went there and we went around the other side. So it kind of gave us a little status of going all the way around the world in 8 days.
As I was saying, one of my best memories is our squadron. We left from Germany and we went on temporary duty assignment down to Sardinia, Italy, which is an island in the Mediterranean. And there was a young girl that got hurt bad in a car accident, and there was a blood shortage on the island, and they came and asked us, and I was able to donate blood because I was O negative, so that was always a pretty good memory.
You know, like I said, no one wants to deploy and volunteer to leave their family and stuff, but once you get over there, your brothers and sisters that you're serving with, you really make a connection with those. And I guess my career is something that I guess, you know, most women can't say that they've done or that they've had, and it's been amazing. Some of the memories that you make when you're over there, and you know, to stay warm, we built fires and little grills that the base had given us when we lost power, and it was freezing, taking ice cold showers. And it's not something that you want to do here in the States because you have all these luxuries and stuff, but when you have to, I mean, you do it. You know, you take a shower in 3-liter bottles of water, you learn how to wash your hair and shower with 3 liters of water, and you know, you eat what you can. And one time our helicopter broke down and we were serving over at Base X, and we were only allowed to take coolers of food for a week because you'd get to come back to the base after a week, and the helicopters broke down and we couldn't make it back to base. So we all piled our food together, and of course, being from Georgia, you know, you can make a meal pretty much out of nothing, and you know, that's what we did, come together and made biscuits, and I mean, it was just great.
That was about it there. That was an experience, first time I'd ever been out of the States. And I got sent back, and I thought my dad had got hurt or got sick, and I came back to the States, and I went back to Fort Bragg, and I thought I was going back to the Dominican Republic. But, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I know the difference between north, south, east, and west, and we weren't going southeast. And come to find out, since I had recon training and Pathfinder, they sent me to Vietnam to the 173rd Airborne Recon Unit. And I served there for, like everybody else, a year. And had some good experiences and bad experiences, but good ones. Thank God, after a few years, you know, they outweigh the, and that's one reason why I joined American Legion. American Legion's full of guys that have been through the same thing.
My father died. He died of old age in 2001. He was buried November 10th of 2001, and as well, November 11th of 2001, Twin Towers were hit. So that's another part of the hardest parts of being away from home and having duty call. Our command in Philadelphia, where I was stationed at the time, was one of the first squadrons that were called up to gain equipment and support for the cleanup of the Twin Towers. We had an aircraft that was in somewhere on the West Coast, and they had to pick up some equipment in Colorado, bring it back to New York, and to help clean up. It was the day of, and no other planes were allowed to fly except those that were in support, and our command was one of them.
Actually, our unit, we'd just go down there and we'd fly against the Italian Air Force, and the Germans would go down there, and the British would go down there, and we would we'd go out and they'd do dogfights and stuff. I was there for 2 months, 2 different times.
I guess my best memory is when I was serving on the Honor Guard and being the team lead, or the most ranking sergeant there. I was the one that presented the family with their flags, and that was this real heartfelt day. When I presented that flag to the family, I saved the letter. And it said that he actually thanked us for the heartfelt presentation of that, and of all the certificates and awards and medals I have in my book. I guess that's my most favorite one. Every time I look at that, I guess that's what I'm most proud of. You know, serving even those who have gone before us.
I got separated from my squad one time, and I was trying to find them. I couldn't. I would just give out, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna have to take a break." So I sat down and I leaned back against the tree, and I know I went to sleep, but you didn't sleep real sound. And when I woke up, I couldn't feel my rifle, and I thought, "Oh no, they done sneaked up and got me." So I eased my eyes open. I didn't see anybody. When I went to sit up, my rifle hit me in the head. I had evidently stretched it and hung up on the limb. So when I sat up, it hit me in the head. And it wasn't funny at the time, but it did. You see, it's funny now. So.
While I was in Jacksonville, Florida, I went through, actually in Memphis, I had went through 8 weeks of being an instructor training. So by the time I got to Jacksonville, I was an instructor and teaching the selected reservists how to advance in their careers and how to dress properly, conduct themselves and where they should be at certain times in their lives or in their careers, and what they should be looking for.
The fun part, flying around the world, was great. I've been a number of places. One of those missions, we were in Asia and ran into a typhoon. Flying around Asia, going from island to island, the aircraft that we had, we would run through a number of points of no return, meaning you're flying from this island to that island. Once you hit this point, you can't go back to where you came from. You have to continue on, and there's nowhere else to land. We were flying from Thailand to Guam, and Typhoon Saomi was out in the ocean and building up steam, and it was headed towards Guam, where we were headed to. We delayed for 3 days in Thailand. Thailand's quite a place to be, but we delayed 3 days in Thailand to go to Guam because of the typhoon out there. And it kept stalling out. It'd move a little bit and stall, it'd move a little bit and stall. And so our superiors said, you know, move on. We had a SEAL team that we were moving. They told us, move on. Get those guys over there to Guam, move them on to, they got things to do. So after that third day and the hurricane stalling, but still building up strength, we decided to move on. We watched it as we got to the point of no return, and it was still sitting there, and it was just off the coast of Guam. Of course, by the time we got to the 3/4 mark, it went right over the top of the island. And a lot of us in the back, I was air crew in the back of the plane. A lot of us didn't realize what we were getting into until we got there, and the ride started getting rough. I was a load master, and a load master figures the weight and balance of the airplane, how much fuel we got, how long we could fly. I was getting real nervous because I knew about, you know, we've got the point of no return, and we're getting close to that point where we don't have anything to keep going with. We got to Guam. It took us, I believe it was 8 attempts to land. There's 2 runways there. One's international, and then the other is a military airfield. And we tried the military airfield, I believe, 4 times, and just couldn't get close enough to see the runway to land on it. Fighting winds and wind shears, 0 visibility, and on both airfields, the ground, there's cliff at the runway. I mean, if you go too low, it's not like you're gonna find the ground and then you go too low, you're smack into a cliff.
Like I said, I was just a mechanic on the plane. They'd go fly them, and then we'd fix them overnight, and then they'd go fly again. So, and I got to go to Rome when I was there. I took a flight into Rome. I think it was $70 round trip back then. We stayed in the Hotel Miami in Rome for some reason, but it was pretty neat to go over there in Rome, because like here you see stores and stuff down there. There's 2,000-3,000-year-old stone monuments every corner you turn around. It's just pretty interesting.
My daughter told me during my last deployment, she sent me an email one day, and she said, Mom, you know, all those, she was 18 at the time, no, 17 at the time. She said, Mom, you know, all those times that you deployed and, you know, we packed up and had to move to family or friends and stuff like that. She said, I really didn't understand. She said, but I understand now. She said, I really don't like it. I mean, so that was one of the heartfelt memories that I've had. And
when we did land, and by the way, it was a smooth landing. I mean, it's like our prayers were answered. All of us on board knew that we were we were in trouble. But it was a very, very smooth landing. To hear those thrust reversers power up and know that we were stopping, whew, that was a relief like you wouldn't believe. But this is how close we came. Our engines, as we're flying around, takeoff and landing, burn 8,000 pounds of fuel an hour. And our auxiliary power unit that we use to run the lights and such to start our engines, it only burns 250 pounds, not 8,000, but 250 pounds of fuel in an hour. We taxied off the runway, got to the terminal, offloaded the SEAL team and our extra crew, had a few of our maintenance personnel, because we're on detachment, stayed back to inspect the airplane and make sure everything's good to go the next morning, fuel it up and prepare it. Being it was bad weather, finding a fuel truck to fuel the airplane for the next day was almost impossible. They waited for about 45 minutes when the auxiliary power unit flamed out of gas. 45 minutes, 250 pounds an hour, 8,000 pounds of fuel to fly that airplane around the... If we hadn't landed, we wouldn't have landed. That was our last go around.
I got out in the latter part of 65, and I look back on it, wouldn't take nothing for it. And that's just about it.
This is my shadow box that I got when I retired. This lists all my duty stations, my ranks, and all my awards, medals that I got. This is the last re-enlistment before I retired. And this is my last cover I had. It's not a hat, it's a cover.
Like I said, that was from 81 to 83, and then I went down to Eglin Air Force Base, and Fort Walton Beach was a pretty good assignment because you had the beach and summertime and spring break, so that was a good place to end up my assignment. And then I moved from there up to Georgia and started working for Lockheed Martin, and I've been pretty much building C-130 airplanes ever since. So it worked out pretty good for me.
I mean, they're all just great. You have bad ones, you have good ones, but you just keep going. And there have been personnel who have really affected me and mentored me, and there's those that I have also mentored as well. And it's all, I mean, it's just sharing. It's not give and take, it's just sharing. So, and it's just a life that it's not a life you chose, I guess, it's a way of life.
I've been all over the world, from Iceland to Brazil and completely around the northern hemisphere. If I could continue to do it, I would. All the people that I've come across and have memories of, I just wish I could keep doing it.